This video is about adding additional effects during the mixing stage, so separate from production. And I think in our particular case, where we've all been using these same effects time and time again to enhance our sounds, the odds of you having to go back and pull one of these effects during a mix is going to be rare. It may not be non-existent. For example, I'm sure I might hear one of your guys' works where I feel like, ooh, I probably should put a chorus or I should add a little bit of additional distortion there. But it's not going to be all the time, mainly because we've been working and talking about these effects so much. So in this video, we're going to introduce something new to the fold and try to talk about additional effects processing in context with other parts. Okay, and really thinking a little bit deeper about that, being willing to experiment, but then also being willing to say, you know what, no, this isn't adding anything. I need to just take it off and move on. So this is the sound that we're going to be working with. Okay, so in and of itself, I would say there is nothing wrong with this sound. However, if you were listening back in a mono system, and I always encourage you to make sure you watch these videos on a stereo playback system, if this was a mono playback system, this is what we would hear. Okay, and now this may not be a problem if, for example, there's also a vocal part happening at the same time, or there's a piano, or there's something else where this synthesizer part is not the main focus, not the most important element at that time. But if it is, this becomes a serious problem, because if we were to play back in a club, for example, and we have a booming kick drum down below, in stereo, this would all work out great. You hear the boom of the kick drum, that keeps pumping through in mono, and then you have this enhancement out wide on the stereo channels with this synthesizer. But you take this into a club, and this gets bounced down into mono, suddenly now that balance becomes slightly off, and the kick drum and whatever bass line you have is probably going to be so much louder than what we have here. So in this example, if this is the most important element of the track, this is the lead of the track, I need to go in here and I really need to process this further. And specifically in a mixing context, I'm going to be processing this in parallel. And when I think of parallel processing, I always go back to the simple idea of filling in the gaps. Okay, filling in the gaps. So this sound as a stereo sound is fantastic, but if it had to be bounced down to mono, there's going to be something lost in translation there. And if you're listening on a mono system, for whatever reason, you'll hear at the end of this how much more we've been able to enhance it. Okay, so I'm going to go in here and I'm going to just duplicate this. Okay, and by duplicating this audio track, we're now processing in parallel. So let's just go in here and take both of these guys and turn them down by about 6 or so that we're not going to have any clipping. Okay, so with the original, I'm not going to touch that at all, or if I am, I'm actually just going to enhance it and make it further wide, or I should say the balance is going to be prefacing more the left and right track as compared to similar, down the middle, whatever. All right, so with the parallel track, I'm going to bring on our new effect, which is the Fuzz plus 3. So this does a variety of things, and it actually is a really great illustration of how distortion also acts as like compression. So I'm just going to solo this out for now. And for starters, we really need to bring the volume down. But what I want you to look at and notice right off the bat with these default settings is just how much more dynamic, how much more movement you're seeing before versus after. So right now it's absolutely crushing this signal, and it may even be making it a little bit more mono than it was before. Let's see if that's the case. Maybe a little bit, not a ton, which is why I do have this extra tool device here at the end. I'm going to go ahead and start to pull this in. Cool. So now I can go in here and I can maybe, pull back on that a little bit. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I let this original, in all of its bright glory, emphasize that brightness. So I have a low pass filter here that I can apply, and I am going to pull that back some. Let's listen to this in context. Cool. I can add a little resonance. Feedback is just basically that idea of the signal coming out and running back into itself, so it's going to compress even harder this way. Also just gives us another little tone and taste for the distortion. So you can see how it really squares it off there. Okay, so I'm happy with the way that's sounding. I'm going to probably make this almost full-blown mono here. Let's go to maybe like 5 or so. And now I just bring that in and hear what a difference this makes. It really helps to fill in the gap. Now, you need to make sure, again, based on how busy the rest of the mix is, if this sort of strategy is actually going to work. And it may not, in which case I might go back and start to think about doing a parallel EQ configuration, maybe even a dynamic EQ configuration, where this signal here, I emphasize the brightness, and in this one, I actually maybe pull away from that a little bit. So I'll just show you that so we can maybe further enhance this. Let's go with our blended EQ because that's really what we're using it for. And again, we'll work in American mode and we'll use Silky. Let's go with 6 dB. That's fine for calibration here. Maybe I'd push that up a little bit. Let's go with like 9. Although I guess my Zodiac says to avoid the number 9, so I'm going to go with 8. And I'm just going to copy this and paste it. And, use your ears, don't use your Zodiac symbol, but I don't know. I just felt like it because I looked at it today. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to emphasize the highs on this one. And on the other one, I'm going to emphasize more the mid-range or the lows. We're going to pretty much do the inverse on the other one. I just want to make sure I get a good frequency band. Turn the saturation on both of them. All right, now we can listen to them in context. Cool, so I'm pretty happy with that, and if I wanted, I could go and, again, increase the width even further. But I'm happy with how it sounds. And now at the end of this, we can do that mono check once again and hear if it's added anything to that center track, which is really the whole point of this. We don't want this to be overly noticeable because remember, there might be other things going on in the mix. And what I might also do here is because I can't really hear if there's a lot in the low end, I might put the span on and just see. Oh yeah. Okay, so I should have paid attention to that from the beginning. So I need to go in here and definitely apply some of a high-pass filter. And now I'm leaving that room down in the bottom there for whatever's going on with a bass or with a kick drum, if it has some kind of sub-element. And that's really the idea, is making sure we do keep that space. And let's just check this one as well, just to see what's going on. This one's okay. That one doesn't really need a filter. Okay, cool. So now let's go and do our final test on this. Might be a little bit too much distortion. Because at the end of the day, I do still want these parts to sound related to each other, but this actually also adds a pretty big degree of separation between the two. Like, you can really hear this parallel version as compared to the original. So I might spend a little bit more time trying to figure out a way to get these to blend. I might go in and take off the EQs, for example. That definitely makes them seem like one sound. So it would then just be a question of, do I want that additional separation? Would I go in here and make it a little more subtle? These are all the questions that you're going to be asking yourself. This is why mixing, it seems very simple on the surface, and it is simple on the surface. But then as you go deeper and deeper, you have to ask more and more questions. Okay, so additional effects processing, I almost always am going in parallel if I'm happy with what the artist has given me, because I'm looking to fill in the gaps. But just remember that you can go back and use any of the effects that we've already been using. A lot of these will have very useful purposes in a mix. Okay, so that's the idea there, and I hope that was helpful for you. Definitely experiment, and at the end, you need to make sure you go back and ask, is this a help to the mix as a whole? And if it isn't, you leave it out every time.